Welcome back to the Coming Down the Aisle podcast. This is the Coming Down the Aisle segment where each week we have a special guest and a special watch along. We've done 100 of these, and so I had to get a big guest for this one, and I got the one, the only, Sammy Brand Muffin, Sam Roberts. What's up? How's it going?
It's good, man. Thank you. Now, have you done 100 of them, or have you done 99 and this is the 100th? Because I don't want to be 101. I want to be 100.
No, you're 100. You are
okay.
100 watch-alongs. And so where I've had a guest, now I haven't necessarily had 100 guests. We've had a couple duplicates here and there. My wife likes to pop on here sometimes, and in fact, she was on last week. She's not a wrestling fan, so it's very fun.
I like doing that. I love, yeah. Getting her reaction. Is this weird to you? Like, does this make sense to you?
In fact, just real quick, the week we got married, we just got married last December. We did wedding complimation, different wrestling weddings. Of course, one of those we have to bring up is Triple H and Stephanie.
I mean, it's the best. It's the best one. But that's also, that's the one that had the most staying power. That was the truest one. I mean, right. It worked out. It worked out okay.
It's okay. It's doing all right for both of them, right?
Yeah.
I gotta ask. This is when Sam Roberts comes on your podcast, you gotta ask hit hard hitting question. Well, number one, what's the haps?
I have no idea what that means. What are you talking about? Nobody says that.
No, I've been a legit fan of your podcast from the beginning, so it's a pleasure. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the Patreon, because I'm a member of the Patreon. I'm a shillbilly, so give people a little breakdown of what you get if you're a shillbilly.
Well, I love it. We've built a nice, the community, right? Like the Not Sam Shills, named after the way I behave for WWE. The Not Sam Shills. The whole basis was there's all the benefits that Patreons have, which is ad-free episodes, early episodes, video, live stuff, Zoom, merch, whatever. But really it was about building a community of kind of just fans that like to talk about this stuff and enjoying talking about this stuff. And I really get a kick out of some of the friendships that have been built. The Discord room is probably my favorite part of the Patreon, and watching people, especially like during an episode of Raw or during a pay-per-view or whatever, everybody's firing off opinions and going back and forth and agreeing or disagreeing or whatever it is. But it's like I don't know, I think sometimes it's a nice escape from general Twitter, as it were, because that place can be scary. But
yes,
if you want in and you're cool,
it's
patreon.com/NotSamWrestling. I appreciate you asking about it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a fun place. Like I said, you got some characters in there in a good way, so they're fun to interact with.
Good.
Famously, you spoke real quick on your podcast, and I like to kind of explore people's fandom here in a little bit where everything started. But famously, I kind of know a little bit of your history already. Your first show was SummerSlam '92, correct?
Yeah, it was the first live show that I ever went to. Yeah,
and then so kind of tell me a little bit from there, like how your fandom grew. Like, what was it specifically that was like? Was it being at that show, or was there something like afterwards? Like, oh, okay, so and so match, whatever, things like that.
No, I was always obsessed with wrestling. It's just it's been my thing. Even when you're a kid and you got multiple things, He-Man and Ninja Turtles and Thundercats and all that stuff, it was always like wrestling was always up here and everything else was down below. And that's just the way it was from as long as I can possibly remember.
Right.
But when I was growing up in the UK, I spent about 4 years there as a kid, and SummerSlam was coming. And it was, there weren't many live shows in the UK at that time, especially, there had never been a pay-per-view. So I, wanted those tickets. And 3 days before the show, my dad came home with tickets to the show, and it was like just mind-blowing. Like the endorphin rush that hit was certainly more than my 7-8-year-old body, probably 7-year-old body could handle at that time. But my parents later told me that they were a little concerned about bringing me to the show because they said, he loves this wrestling stuff so much, but when he goes to that show, he's going to see, maybe they're not making full contact. Maybe this isn't quite on the level. Maybe there's more performance here than we realized. And they didn't know, I didn't even occur to me, right? It wasn't that I liked that or didn't like that. It didn't matter. Like that never was even a consideration. It wasn't why I liked it, why I didn't like it. It had nothing to do with anything. I was showing up there and seeing all the people reacting to everything and seeing everything. This is way before HD television. We're watching our little, boob tube and seeing it and seeing all these larger than life stars and seeing all these colors and hearing all this music and the thud of the mat and everything. It was just, there was absolutely no turning back from that point on. Like it was the greatest thing I had ever seen. And I haven't looked back for a moment since.
Yeah. I can actually very much relate to that. I've spoke about this story before here, but my first live show was a WCW house show. And the main event was Sting versus Vader. Very, very good match,
That's amazing.
Of course, I was a Stinger, face paint, everything. Match was great. Sting, won. Everything was great. Booing the heck out of Vader the whole time. And so we go to leave, and then we stop because we got about 30-minute drive back home. And we pull off a gas station. And I still got the face paint on, mind you. And I'm walking towards the gas station. My dad's like, "Hey, let's go get you a candy bar," So walking toward there, and I see this car pull up, and it's Harley Race and Vader get out of the car. Now I've got the Stinger face paint, and I'm 6 years old, and I go, "Nope, not happening. I'm out of here."
You were afraid.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was like, yeah, not happening. And so my dad just was like chuckled to himself. That's kind of the kayfabe, it was kind of that era, right? And famously, you speak about the new kayfabe on your show, and I actually kind of mentioned that a little bit as well too, because there is a sense of new kayfabe where you don't know what's real, what's not, and based off of social media. Kind of explain your thought process as far as what that goes about.
Well, for me, I think that wrestling is starting to catch up with the sort of level of enlightenment that its fans have. That traditionally wrestling could be done in a certain way, but once every fan became an insider, and once every fan got the internet, there is no internet wrestling community. That's the whole wrestling community. That's it. Like it takes you 1 week of watching the show to start using insider jargon and understanding who the writers are and understanding what the politics are. And I've watched it happen. It isn't hyperbole. Like I've seen people who don't watch wrestling and within a month of watching their first show are on Reddit and they're going like, "Oh yeah, I heard that promo, but really backstage he didn't want to do that, right?" And it's like, yeah, yes. And I think that new kayfabe is all about an acknowledgement of that this acknowledgement that we have to tell stories to that group of people. That's not a subsect of fans. That's not, well, there's the smart fans, but everyone's a smart fan. Everybody's got access to information and everybody knows what's going on. So I think the new kayfabe is the idea of telling stories, understanding the way people receive information and the way people perceive what's going on, both on the show and on the internet. It's doing shoot interviews. It's going on a podcast like mine and answering questions that sound like you're out of character, but are really leading to what you plan on doing next. It's maybe feeding something to a dirt sheet. So the dirt sheet reports on where you plan on going as a character, as opposed to, just simply reporting, hey, here's what this real life guy is doing. It's taking advantage. It's tweeting back and forth with people who, when you're looking at the tweet, you're like, oh, that they really have a problem with each other. I didn't realize that. But it's not. It's just a new way of storytelling.
Yeah. And it's fascinating to me. This is the evolution of wrestling and how it just keeps speeding up this evolution of wrestling. And I think the best example of that is the year 2022. How wild it's been. I think 20 years ago, or I guess now 26 years ago, we would probably look at 1996 as a benchmark, 1997 as a benchmark in wrestling. Are we going to see that, you think, in 20 years from now, 2022 being one of those benchmarks in professional wrestling?
I mean, I don't know, man. Maybe every year is going to be like this.
Yeah.
The way things are going, because we could have had the same conversation in 2021 about the way people were operating, and we could have had the same 2020. Who's going to ever forget 2020? People having to figure out what to do in the pandemic. How about 2019? AEW shows up. What a crazy year in wrestling 2019 was. I don't know, man. 2022 is by far the craziest, but we're not getting less crazy as the years go on.
Right.
So, and that goes back to, the way you have to tell stories differently. It's because as information is passed differently, maybe this is just the pace at which we're moving.
Yeah. It's just been unbelievably. If you stop and think about it, Stone Cold Steve Austin wrestled in a match this year, and it was like this, probably sixth biggest story of the year.
I was going to say, does that even make the top 10? It's one of those man, that's going to be, it is going to be a fun podcast. Now that you've got me thinking about it, I almost want to start working on it now, where I think the last Not Sam Wrestling podcast of the year might be,
that's awesome.
I'm going to explain 2022 to somebody who just woke up out of a coma. You went to bed New Year's Eve 2021, and you woke up New Year's Eve 2022. Let me tell you what you missed.
It starts day one, too. Literally day one.
Literally day one. Roman's not around for the pay-per-view. What are they going to do?
We'll give it to Brock Lesnar.
I thought Big E was going to be champion for. You thought so, huh? No, Big E broke his neck. What?
Yeah. By the way, Vince McMahon is no longer here.
Wait. No, okay, no, I'm getting ahead of myself now. That's the second half of 2022.
Yeah. In fact, I was actually kind of doing a little prep work. I was looking at your interview with Renee Paquette that you did. I think it was right around the time Stephanie had said she was stepping down. And this is how fast the news just completely evolved, because you were like, I don't know what's going to happen in a year or two. And literally a month later, bam.
Yeah. How great would it have been, though, if I was like, I don't think Stephanie can stay away. I think she'll probably be back as the CEO.
Oh, man. So you're a lot of your fandom. We could get back to your fandom real quick. So I've heard you talk about, you're kind of a new gen guy. Is that right?
I love the new generation.
Yeah.
I think that partly because those are my formative years, right? Mm-hmm. That's what 93 to 96, you would probably argue, and so I was 10 to maybe 9 to 12, 10 to 13, whatever it was. Yeah, man, Diesel was my guy. I loved Diesel. I had the Diesel glove, then I had the red leather fingerless Shawn Michaels gloves with the painter's cap. I loved the new generation, and I love looking back on it nostalgically now, because it's fun to look at the garbage, but then it's also fun to look at what was bubbling under the surface, and I think a lot of the work rate stuff that was happening in the new generation combined with a lot of what WCW brought in for the cruiserweight division is what created kind of wrestling as we know it now, the more athletic style, especially like once the Elite started to have their smoking hot run across the Indies. Like I feel like that style, a lot of it, at least in America, comes from what was bubbling under the surface in the new gen and then the cruiserweight division.
Right. It's an interesting area because if you think about it right now, we got Roman Reigns main eventer in WWE. Before that, John Cena. Before that, Triple H, Batista, those guys, Stone Cold Steve Austin. All those guys worked what's called a WWE, WWF main event style, basically where it's brawling. You're not using your body because you're going to have to be on a lot. However, this is the only era where you got Bret Hart, whereas he's just taking crazy bumps. You had Shawn Michaels taking crazy bumps, and they really put their bodies to the test, kind of like what you mentioned. Like it just brought to this era where you have this real work rate matches, and it's the only area in the Vince McMahon world where we have that. So it is a fascinating era to me, and we're actually going to be watching a great match. So real quick, were you a Bret or Shawn guy?
As a kid,
Yeah,
I always loved Bret. I was a Shawn guy though. Like, I was,
yeah.
I remember walking into middle school with a red T-shirt on that was too big for me, with a picture of Shawn Michaels, with his skin coming out of the heart. Like, what are you doing, dude? That's not cool. But yeah, I was when the boyhood dream came true, I was cheering.
Yes.
I was cheering as a kid. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I would have to agree. Yeah. So I was definitely a Bret during the new generation. And I was like, and which is a whole other subject really too, of that, because Bret, you could feel he's getting this fandom, these people kind of turning on him, and which we can, obviously you're going to get a whole another situation with that. But I think it's all a part of the wrestling fabric at that time. I think everybody's just like, yeah, Bret's cool, but this Heartbreak Kid, he's the stuff.
Yeah, but then I tell you what, once the Attitude Era kicked off, I was a Bret guy 10 times out of 10. I mean, I wasn't standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance. I was so anti-American. I might as well have changed my citizenship to Canadian. I was all in with the Hart Foundation. I loved them. I remember I went to SummerSlam 97 at the Meadowlands, right? And I went with my sister's boyfriend at the time and his dad and one of our friends or whatever. And his dad was like an old New York Italian guy. And he was like, don't tell my dad you're rooting for Bret instead of the Undertaker. And I was like, why? And he was like, what'd you guys say? And I said, I'm rooting for Bret. And he said, yo, what? I said, I'm rooting for Bret Hart. And he said, Bret Hart, the same Bret Hart that said America looks like a toilet? Bret Hart? Yeah, dude. Yeah, that's my guy.
That's great. And I love watching the Wrestling with Shadows too, watching all the little behind the scenes of that too. You have the woman who was like, I became a graphic designer because of Bret Hart.
I went to college. You became a graphic designer, and I never would have done that without Bret the Hitman Hart. And it's like,
what?
Okay.
All right. It's good stuff. But this week we're going to be going in your house, in our house, in everybody's house, in your house too, more specifically. This is